I have an online presence as the Groovy Brown Goddess. I am formally educated in tarot and root work. So that is where I come from on what I call the woo-woo side of me. I started reading the tarot professionally about 15, 17 years ago. I lose track of time, and it's moving fast the older I get. But so I've been reading tarot cards for a very long time. I've had several teachers over the course of that career, I guess you could call, in professional reading, that have helped me and helped elevate my skills in that area higher. I have been studying with an actual mentor, root work, which, if you're unfamiliar with that, it's a practice that came to this country back when the slaves came to this country. They wanted to still practice the same spiritual and religious type of system that they practiced when they were in Africa. But because of the dynamics between the slave master and the slave, they weren't allowed to carry that on. So they eventually modified what they were doing to become a practice that we now call root work. It's kind of independent of religion, but a lot of root workers lean towards Christian beliefs, and the Bible is a big part of it. So hopefully you're not uncomfortable with the mention of the Bible or some of the concepts of Christianity. It won't be a lot here, but just to let you know, I practice ancestor veneration from the base of root work. So some of that influences what I have done and what I've learned to do as far as ancestor veneration is going. But you, as an average girl, average guy out there, can completely practice ancestor veneration without any, religious attachment. You can do this as a practice, and some people only have ancestor veneration as a spiritual practice. All right, so I've gotten a little off course here. Who am I? That was a simple question to answer, and I totally went somewhere with it. My day job, I have a bachelor degree in computer information systems, and I work in the Washington, D.C. area as an IT professional. I'm really in the area of IT security and cybersecurity. So I work as a federal contractor I've supported several federal agencies in the area. So very logical, very logic-based career. What I do all day, it does not, for the most part, stretch my creative muscles at all. So I come home and I dig into my tarot and I dig into my root work, and that's where I just, come alive. So I don't know what that says about me as a person. Hopefully it says I'm well-rounded. So I'll leave that up to your judgment. So that's who I am. Who are your ancestors? So one thing that you will notice as you are doing your internet search of ancestors, everyone talks about the ancestors pretty much in a way that leads you to believe it's synonymous with anyone in your family who has died. And I've come to find that that is not the case. And here's the difference. If you have an Aunt Sue who passed away last week, she is not an ancestor. She is a beloved dead relative. And the difference is that once you die, it is believed that there are many you have a lot of spiritual tasks ahead of you. Then you ascend as you go along. So, someone who just passed away last week or just passed away yesterday, they're in a certain spiritual space where they may not even realize that they have passed away from this world. So they may still be confused about that. They may still believe they're alive, and they're starting to come to the realization, hopefully, that they have passed away and that they are no longer of this world. So as they start that journey, they'll hopefully ascend to a higher place spiritually. Of course, I can't sit here with any certainty and tell you how many phases you go through before you reach the land of the ancestors, but it is believed that your ancestors are actually, you wouldn't know them in this lifetime. So there's several generations back. So you could assume that starting with probably your great-great-grandparents, or maybe the generation before then, that's where you get those family members passing into the land of the ancestors. So when people use the term online, like, oh, yesterday so-and-so died and now they're an ancestor. Not yet. Best case scenario, they get there, but of course, where we get into some confusion is like how soon is the confusion comes in is, in this world we have physical time and they don't have physical time. So perhaps to us, an ancestor is someone in our family that was 3 to 4 generations ago. Over there where they are, that could seem to be, 2 days, 3 days, if you're going to try to assess the concept of time to where they are and what they're going through. So ancestors, they have many, our dead have many spiritual tasks and before they reach the land of the ancestors. And so you're going to hear me refer to our dead or your dead or my dead. And what I mean is someone who you probably are old enough to have known in your lifetime, but has not yet entered into the world of the ancestors. So for me, ancestor veneration and veneration of my dead, I lump it together. So my father died in 2016. He's on my altar space because he's my dead, and I venerate him along with my other ancestors. So I just want to make that really clear distinction. There are a lot of cultures and practices that believe that our dead continue to dwell in this world and that they have the power to influence us. So they're believed to be able to bless us, and conversely, they could curse us if that's something that they chose to do. So the belief is that they wield great authority and they can control or influence the well-being of the living members in their family. They can protect the well-being of the physical members of the living members, I should say, of their family. And they can remove obstacles from your path. So the goal with ancestor veneration really is to walk hands in hands with them so that your relationship doesn't end, and so that they will bless you and protect you and help you when you need help. Now, the other thing about the ancestors and all this influence they wield. So let me use an example. If I were to go out today looking for a new job and I wanted their help, I was running into delays and problems with getting interviews and things of that nature. And I said, oh man, I think this is something that the ancestors can help me with. I think these current obstacles that I'm experiencing, they could totally move out of my way. Well, they're not going to just jump in and do it. They can't. We have this thing called free will as well. So the way our free will works with the power that they wield is that if we want their direct assistance in an issue, we go to them and we talk to them and we ask them for their help. And then they are very happy most times, especially for a person who venerates them regularly. They're very happy usually to jump in and give you a hand. So it is a very powerful practice, and it has been something that has brought me a lot of peace and a lot of joy in my life. And when I say veneration, let me just make this clear. Veneration is not ancestor worship. It is honoring an ancestor. So if you think of it like if your grandmother, who hopefully you love and adore, came to your home for a visit, you wouldn't worship her. You would honor her. You would invite her in. You would make her feel welcome. You would bring her something to drink, something to eat. You would treat her like, the queen that she is while she's in your home. And that is what you're doing when you venerate your ancestors. You are giving them a space in your home, and you are welcoming them there, and you're giving them sustenance through your offerings. So just want to make that clear as well. All right, so where does service to the ancestors actually take place? The altar space, obviously. However, the altar space can take many shapes and forms. But however you set up your altar, you have to know that that is a place that is reserved for your ancestors. That is their space. Once you set it up, that is where they will come and visit you and sit in your home. So it becomes a sacred space. And once you engage in your practice of veneration, it becomes a place of great power. I have been in homes of people who have ancestor altars and they attend to these altars regularly and with great care. And I can feel the power coming from that altar. And, it's not a scary thing. It's a soothing thing. You could feel the strength and the power, but it also feels very soothing and very loving. So, I don't know how other people react when they come into my space and when they are around my altar, but because no one's ever, told me personally, but I'm sure I'm a little immune to it because I interact with it all the time. But I do know one time my mother, when she came to visit for Thanksgiving holiday, she couldn't take her eyes off of it. She doesn't practice ancestor veneration, but she couldn't take her eyes off my space. And then, I remember months later, one of my uncles passed away, and she was very close to him. And after the funeral, she gave me this picture of him, and she said, you put this on your table, okay? Put this on your table. And I was like, what do you mean? She's like, you know that table with all the candles and the pictures, you put this on that table, okay? And it was just like really striking to me because my mom's not a religious person. She doesn't practice any type of spiritual practice that I'm aware of. And, you know, it was like, I didn't expect her to do that. Like I was going to put my uncle on my space, but I didn't expect that she would urge me to do that. So I have to, you know, I sat back for a second and I said, well, you know, she must have really felt something, just being, when she comes to my home, she must really feel something, or she must see the strength and the beauty of the altar and respect it. And so do know that this will become a space in your home that will be a very powerful space for them. So the types of altar spaces that you generally will see are indoor altar spaces, and it's usually a table or some type of furniture, piece of furniture with everything set up on it, as you see, similar to this picture here. But I have encountered people that have outdoor altars and outdoor altar spaces, and they're actually very beautiful because they're very much, they very much incorporate a lot of nature into it. So I saw one that really was very striking to me that was made, it was on top of a tree stump. And it, you know, there were a lot of crystals and stones on it and everything, and candles were lit, and it was just really a beautiful, stunning space. So if you have an outdoor space and maybe you live in a climate that stays warm, because I wouldn't want to be out there in the winter trying to service the ancestors, freezing my butt off. But, you know, do you. But an outdoor space is beautiful. And, you know, you can also, I mean, honestly, in my estimation, you are not limited to just that one space. So in the spring or the summertime, that might be a good, you know, you could set up a second space for them where the weather's amenable and you can be outside. And especially if you are a person that likes to commune in nature, you know, that would be a really lovely thing to do. The other type of space that you will see are portable spaces. And a portable space is, most of the time when I see that, is under two different situations. I had a friend who traveled constantly for her job, and she was probably on the road more than she was home. And she wanted some type of portable altar that she could take with her and that she could use in a hotel room while she was away. And, you know, what we ended up coming up with for her was an old cigar box. And it was perfect because, you know, it was portable. She could store everything inside. She could take it with her and, you know, just pack it in her suitcase. And anything that you might pack like of this nature in your suitcase, and we'll talk about what are some of the supplies that are needed a little later, but anything that you would pack in this suitcase, you know, you think about TSA these days, and the truth of the matter is, if you really have a problem, if you present it to them as a religious item or a religious artifact, they have to let you travel with it. Now, you know, we won't have a knife in there or anything that's really truly dangerous, but if you're trying to get something through security at the airport and they're just like, you know, you would not want to throw away or discard your portable altar. So you would just declare it as a religious item and travel with it. She never had any issues with it, and she's definitely, you know, still traveling with it. So I don't think you'll very much run into it. But then again, I live near Ronald Reagan National Airport here in DC, and for some reason, probably about a year or so ago, whenever I would fly, they would try to throw away. They wouldn't let me travel with my little travel size toothpaste for some reason. So you never know what the TSA is looking for. But, hopefully your portable altar will not get flagged. Now, the other time that I have heard about people wanting a portable altar is when they live in a household with individuals who are going to not allow them to have an altar set up, or they're just spooked out by it. And so, I've seen where teenagers have wanted to have a portable altar, or people with roommates who may not understand the practice and think it's something to be afraid of. So we will, hopefully at some point we'll be able to get my video to play, because I covered some of those things in the video. But if not, I'll step through that a little later in this presentation, how to put together a portable altar if that's what you desire to do. Okay. All right, so I gathered some different images, and just online, gathering some images, and I thought we could do an examination of these images to see, some of the ways that these altars are built and how that could lend itself to the altar that hopefully you eventually build. So this altar space, I actually think this is a really lovely altar. It really appeals to me. And basically, it's a very low type of table, or it may be coffee table height, but I doubt it. But I have seen these tables before built as altar tables. Very low to the ground, and you can see they have it back in a little nook here in the home. And this piece here that's on the top, I have actually seen pieces like this sold in Asian stores. I work in Chinatown in DC, and there's a little Asian store across from the office that I work in, and it has these pieces for sale similar to this. And the ones they sell actually have shelves in them, so they have even more storage or display space, I guess you could say. So, if you want to get really elaborate like this, it's amazing. You can see hanging here from it, it looks like it looks like prayer beads here, but you could totally hang rosary pieces or rosaries from this type of thing too. As we examine these things, please know that a little later in my presentation, I'll be talking about some of these individual things that you're seeing here on these altars and why they're important, or what meaning they bring to the altar. So don't feel like we're going to skip over that, because I'm totally going to address that with you. So you also see an abundance of picture frames there, and some of them look as though they have actual photos in them, and then others might have certificates or maybe even newspaper articles or something of that sort in them, and that is common. You will see that a lot on ancestor altars. You also see votive candles there, and glass enclosed candles, and of course, it should go without saying, but I will say it for the sake of this presentation, you always want to be conscious of fire safety. So whether that means you light candles and you sit there and during the time that you commune with your ancestors, you have your candles lit, and then you snuff your candles out before you walk away, or you practice safe ways of burning glass enclosed candles. I have been burning glass enclosed candles probably for the better part of 30 plus years. And while they have a reasonable amount, they're reasonably safe to burn, and you don't have to necessarily stand there every moment with them, things can happen with them. I've had them explode. Like I'll hear glass, you hear like a pop, and you come back and the glass is broken and the candles broken, basically. And so that could be hazardous. One of the things that I do is I drink coffee, and they're harder to find, but I look for coffee brands that sell coffee in metal cans. And then I clean out those cans and recycle them. I put them on the altar space, and I'll put my candle inside of it, so that if something were to happen, like the glass exploding or breaking, it's safer, because more than likely that can will contain it. But again, those are just some tips, but do use fire, do be aware that you need to be as safe as you can, and don't get in the situation, because unfortunately, there was this spiritual worker that I used to follow online a few years ago, and she, her and her husband and her daughter perished in a house fire that started because a fire started on one of her altars during the night. So it's a real concern, and people tend to get relaxed with it, but you want to always make sure that you are vigilant when it comes to fire safety. So this altar here, if you were to see my altar, my ancestor altar, it looks very similar to this. The first thing was that it was on a piece of furniture. It looked to be on a dresser. And my personal ancestor altar is actually on a desk that has drawers for storage. And that's a huge thing that I've done my altar a few different ways. And this is like the best setup that I have come to thus far, because the storage makes a big difference. You're going to have supplies that you're going to use infrequently, and having them right there and having storage where you can stick them away in a drawer out of the way is a really big plus for me. Also, there were photos hanging in frames on the wall, and that's something that I do practice with mine, because I've come to have quite a lot of pictures. So there's only so much space on a table or a desk that you have that you can hang them or place them. So wall space is great. Like use that vertical space to go up, and then I keep them lined up, so to speak, with the desk, and hopefully it'll go back to that image, because that's what they had done in that altar space as well. So, and what I mean is, like, say my desk, let's say it's 4 feet across. My pictures aren't on the wall 6, 7, or 8 feet across. It is lined up 4 feet, like with my desk. So that whole space, the desk, the wall above it, is all space that I've dedicated in my home to the ancestors. And so it's a nice, visually neat way as well, but there is a significance to it, because it's kind of like, I give you this space and the rest of the space is mine. You know, the rest of the wall, the rest of the room is my space. All right, so let's just start talking about this one here because I don't think we're gonna be able to go back for whatever reason. Again, this is probably just a small table, maybe even a card table that they've placed the white cloth on, and the white cloth is really important too because white is a very pure color, it's a very soothing color, and it is a color that I use on my space with my ancestors. Can you use other colors? Yes. One of my spiritual teachers, she uses a purple cloth on her ancestor space, and that cloth is actually a cloth that was at the funeral of her sister, was draped across the casket. And she was given that cloth, and she uses it as a table covering for her ancestor space. So especially if you have any cloth of significance like that, that can be used. But if not, and you're just trying to get started with something, white is a good color, and you're not going wrong at all with white. And it is also a belief that it is a very soothing color to the souls of the departed. So that's another reason you may wish to stick with white. I've stuck with white, and that is the actual reason I've stuck with white. So here you see quite a few items. You see there is a skull there, and the images of skulls and skull figurines and things like that nature, and especially, you know, we're in Halloween, so they're everywhere. And they're especially good to pick up after Halloween in the stores when they're on sale. But yeah, so you have those types of things that you could put on your altar as well. So you can put like a candle holder that's made like a skull. You can put any representation in that way. You see in traditions like in Mexico with the Day of the Dead, they use the sugar skull images everywhere, and those you can place on your altar as well. Also on the left side of this image, you see something that looks like a bottle, and it really is a spirit bottle. So depending on what tradition you practice, some traditions, they do create this type of curio. It's called a spirit bottle, and you could create one for your ancestors, and you can house that on their altar space as well. You see looks like a little glass of water. Water should always be on your space. Water is a medium of communication with the spirit world. And that is specifically why we give water to spirits. So the ancestors are no different. You will also give water for the reason that it refreshes their spirit. So definitely something you want to do in honor of them. So water is a great offering that you always want to have on your space. And it can be something as simple as like what they have there, a glass or a jar that has water in it. It doesn't have to be over the top and fancy. In fact, if you took as your base for your altar a piece of wood, like you could go to a home improvement store or hardware store and have them cut you a piece of wood. It could be as big as you want it to be. It could be 3 feet by 5 feet. And then you cover that with white cloth, and you could do that easily by, on the underside of the wood piece, using a staple gun to staple the white cloth down to that piece. You could take that, set it on the floor and in a corner, and that becomes your ancestor altar. I know people advanced in their practice of ancestor veneration who still have that type of altar space. it is perfectly appropriate to put your ancestors on the floor. In fact, if we look at traditions in Africa, where it's believed the veneration of the ancestors began, they do that. They actually, there are parts of Africa where they bury their dead under the floorboards of the house. So instead of having the service for them and going to a cemetery, they are buried under the floorboards of the home. And so they literally live with their ancestors. So, and when I say under the floorboards, I don't mean like you lift the floorboard and there's a body there, but in the ground, under the floor of the home. So, yeah, so they literally live with their ancestors on a daily basis. Yes, it's totally appropriate to have your altar space on the ground. And some people will tell you that they prefer that you put them in an altar space on the ground. So totally a decision that's up to you. And as you start to venerate your ancestors, they do start to communicate with you. And believe me, they will let you know what they like and what they don't like, what's appropriate and what's not appropriate for them, because your altar will be different from, and it should be different from everyone else's altar, because your family and you are unique, and your space is going to represent the uniqueness of your family and your own personal style and uniqueness as well. So in this case, we see they have a food offering out on the altar for the ancestors, and that's something we'll talk about more as well. So that is one of the types of offerings that you will give them, should you choose to, is a food offering, and we'll talk about how to do that and the parameters around that. You also see here offerings of a cigarette, offerings of like some mints there, candies, and you see a bottle wild Irish rose. I haven't seen that in a long time. Liquor. So those are common offerings that we give our ancestors. And depending on your dead, you will choose some of those to offer as well. Here they do have a small glass enclosed candle. You can see the picture of an ancestor or a departed loved one there. Another important thing they have on the space is a live plant. Live plants are great to keep on your space. Ancestors love, or actually spirits, I find, love flowers and they love plants. Now, if you're going to put a live plant on the space, and I wouldn't use a silk plant, the connection with the plant is, number one, the dirt and the fact that the plant is living, and that's what makes it appeal to your spirits. So a silk plant just won't have that same cachet or energy to it. You do want to make sure that you keep the plant alive. You don't want anything wilted or dying on a space with your ancestors. You want to keep it alive. So if you've got a little bit of a green thumb, that's a perfect, and you can say it's an offering to put on their space. Now, I will say, even if you don't have a green thumb, if you were to buy something like an ivy, those things grow almost no matter what. Even, I mean, they grow like weeds, actually. They may even be a weed, who knows? But they grow and grow and grow. So people who have issues with keeping plants alive, I usually will suggest to them that they use ivy as a plant and try to maintain that. Also, we see an incense burner. You can choose a pleasing scent that you want to burn for them. Some people like to burn Nag Champa, which is considered a spiritual incense, and that's perfectly fine. You could burn church incense. You can burn any number of things as far as scents are concerned. And if someone in your family line had a particular scent or smell that was, that you could say is associated with them, then by all means find some incense in that scent and burn it, because that can serve as a great offering. It looks like the little green thing next to the incense burner. It looks like a little cauldron, which is also good for use for other types of burnt offerings. But it looks like they have a little prayer card there in that one. And, those type that you pick up at Catholic supply stores or botanicas. And that's great. So here's what I'll say about religion and religious items. If you aren't particularly religious, and say you're just like, I am not with Christianity and I don't want anything of Christianity, I will ask you to pause for a moment, because you don't necessarily need to have that belief. And this practice isn't about forcing that belief on you. But if you have ancestors and departed loved ones who were Christian, let's use Christianity as an example. If they were Christian and they practiced Christianity throughout their life, and maybe they were staunch Christians where, this was their belief, and, they believed in the Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost. This space, what you want to consider about this space is for your ancestors. So the things that you put here, you want to put things that reflect them. So you may not be Christian. You may not like crosses, and, if they were Catholic, you don't believe in the saints and all that kind of thing, but they did. So we put things that reflect them and their beliefs. So you will see different types of religious artifacts, whether it's, a Bible, a Quran, Torah, whatever. You will find those items on ancestor altars of people who don't necessarily, subscribe to those beliefs. So just know that. And just know that it will make your departed family members more inclined to frequent that space that you've set up for them if you give them things there that they relate to and feel comfortable with. And I'll explain a little bit more in detail as we go on as to why that would be, now that they've passed on, that they would like to see that Bible or that cross or whatever it is. So as I go on looking at this here, it looks, and it's very interesting. So next to the plate of food, you see, it looks like a little homemade book. It says Ancestor Book of Names. And why is that important? Because we don't always have pictures of our ancestors. And truthfully, our ancestors go back to the beginning of time. So yeah, you won't have names and pictures for thousands of them. But that doesn't mean that your veneration won't reach their spirit. That doesn't mean that they won't frequent your space. Most of the time, when I call for my ancestors, those spirits that are responding, they are so old that, there's no way for me to have knowledge of who they were, but that's fine. I am of their blood. So the thing is, your ancestors' blood is in your veins. And, your blood is their blood. Your bone is their bone. So you are of them. They respond to you because you matter to them, being the one here on this earth at this time that represents them. And so as far back as you could go, say, if you don't have pictures, you could just make a simple book like that records names, and you could keep it there. And as you gain further knowledge of their names, you could record it in the book as you go along. I also have some of my relatives' names in picture frames alongside the picture. So I'll write out the names in a list, then I'll frame it, and then I'll put it up on my altar space as well. So that's another important thing that I see here on this particular altar. Okay, well, here we go. Okay, so this one looks a lot busier. And I'll be honest, I go through different moods with mine. So I have gone through periods of time where I wanted my space to be more clear and more clean and more streamlined looking. And then I've gone through periods of time where I want something like this. I want it to look busy and have a lot going on and that kind of thing. And you may start out with a streamlined space, but as you come into further knowledge of who your dead are, you end up with more items on your space, whether it's, more pictures, more, because you'll be surprised. We'll talk a little later about how they communicate with you once you start venerating them. And they're going to make sure to bring information your way that will let you know who they are. And so naturally, you're going to start collecting more and more on your altar space. But this is a good one. One of the things that I see here that I was speaking about in the last picture was you can see the little religious statues. Looks like Jesus is there, and there's another statue of a female. So a lot of people will have like statues of Jesus and Mother Mary and stuff like that, and that's totally appropriate, especially, if your ancestors or your family was Christian. So that's totally appropriate to have. You see a different kind of candle here. I call them stick candles. You may call them taper candles. And yeah, so that definitely, you want this person, whoever has this altar, they definitely have to keep a closer watch on their candles as they burn. You see several glasses of water. Now, and you see them in the middle there around the cross that's set up. This lets me know that this is something that's, this altar is an ancestor altar that's like from what you see in a Latino culture. So there's a tradition called a spiritismo. I've seen it in Puerto Rico, but it's also practiced in the United States. The spiritismo, they have what they call a boveda, and a boveda is altar space that is definitely their ancestors are involved with on their boveda space, but other spirits as well. So they have what they call their spiritual frame. So there's spirit guides and all those types of spirits around them. They honor them all on a space like this too. But I have seen people have a setup like this with the multiple glasses in a certain formation. They call it a boveda, but they also refer to it as their ancestor altar. So a little bit of a mix of tradition here, but definitely a great altar space. And as you can see, this person also has the pictures going up the wall. Now on your space, you don't want any pictures that have living people in them. You only want your pictures to have your dead in them. If you have, say you have a great picture of your grandfather and you, and it's one of the few pictures or maybe the only picture you might have of them, and you're like, well, how can I use it on the space? Make a photocopy of it and cut yourself out. What is believed is that placing living people, living persons, or representations of living persons on an ancestor altar, it's believed that it makes the dead hungry to be with the living. And by doing that, it is believed that you may usher someone living to an earlier grave. So that's a long-standing belief that I think across the board, once you start to look at ancestor veneration, that's a well agreed upon belief. So there has to be some merit to that in my mind, because it is something that people who know what they're talking about when they talk about veneration, they always warn you about that. So don't mix your living with your dead. So any picture that you might use that has someone that's living in it, or maybe you're not sure if, I don't know about you, but there's parts of my family that I haven't seen in many years. So it is totally plausible that I might not know that someone is still alive or has passed. So if you have any doubt, just, make a photocopy and take that person who you think may be living out of it. You only want the picture to represent the person who has passed or people who have passed. So in the case of, it looks like in the very back in the corner there's a picture with multiple people in it. And if you have like one of those family heirloom photos, that depicts a whole family, maybe back in the 1800s or something, so you know that all these people have passed on, and you would place that picture is perfectly fine for placement on your altar as well. But that's a nice, lively looking altar space that I am typically drawn to. Now here's an example of what I was speaking about before as an outdoor altar. And an outdoor altar can be as simple as this. They have used probably cascarilla, which is a chalk-like substance made from eggshell. You find it in spiritual supply stores. So they've marked off a clear area for the ancestors. And it's the best way to describe it is, marking off the space, is that you probably don't want them roaming around. So you give them a clearly defined space. And so they've marked it off. They have everything on the ground, which is a principle we talked about earlier of having your altar space on the ground. You see the fresh flowers there, the water, the food offering. And so this, and that stick there is something that's referred to as a goon stick, which is an ancestor stick. Some of the ATRs, the African traditional religions, they have those items. So this is a great altar space. Again, I have 4 seasons. I don't really want to be outside in the winter, so I might set something similar to this in the summer. But yeah, it is one way to go with an outdoor altar. All right. So interesting note here is this is a fireplace mantle. And if you were to look back into traditions and why things are done, traditionally, many, many moons ago, people used fireplace mantles as altar spaces. So this is a totally legit use of your mantle. You see the Bible there. You see cigars. Cigars are often used as a tobacco offering. You also see an oil lamp. And believe it or not, you can find oil lamps at Walmart because I use oil lamps, and they are great. And they're actually, I find them safer than candles. People often think about kerosene as fuel for the lamp, but that's not the case. They have an oil that they sell, a clear oil, and it doesn't have a strong scent like a kerosene would. So great way to give light to your ancestors. And I actually like the idea of a mantle altar. There's something about that I really feel drawn to. So let me stop here for a moment and see if I have any questions. If you have any questions that you'd like to raise at this time on the stuff that we've covered so far.
I have a question.
Sure.
Are only blood relatives able to be ancestors?
Good question. And it is a question that comes up a lot. No, actually, no. So I have relatives that helped raise me. My parents raised me, but I have relatives that, because I have a stepfather, and they were integral in my life, like my grandmother and uncle and grandfather. But they are not blood relatives of mine, but they loved me and treated me as one of theirs. So they as well can be honored. Do you want to put them on the same space that you would put your blood relatives? Yes or no. It's up to you and it's up to them. So as we talk a little bit further in the presentation about communication with the ancestors, how they communicate with you, when I first had them on my altar, along with my blood relatives, everything was copacetic. And then as I started to encounter more and more communication with my ancestors, it wasn't like I could tell it was a problem. It was like a request. So what I ended up doing was developing two spaces, and then that didn't feel right. So ultimately what I came to is, on the table, I have one half of the table with my blood relatives, the other half with those that loved me like family, who treated me like family. So that's how I resolve that. And what I would suggest is, anytime you're starting with it, use any combination of what I just described. Put them all together. Start with one on one side, one on the other, or maybe if you have the room in your living space to make a small separate table for them, do that. And see how it starts to feel to you over time. They're going to dictate to you what works for them. So yeah, that's a great question. It's not always about blood. It's definitely about blood in the fact that your ancestors are your ancestors, whether you knew them or not. But it is not always restricted to blood. And if you were adopted and you don't know who your ancestors are, and you don't know who your birth parents are, or anything like that, you can still participate in this practice in a very strong way, actually. You would probably go the route of, instead of having all the pictures, you would say, blood of my blood, known or unknown, in this case, unknown ancestors, I honor you, right? Because you don't know who they are yet. But what you're going to find, like I was talking about a little earlier, once they start to communicate with you, you will get indications and different things, information come to you out the blue, things that they want you to know about them. And if you're adopted, by all means, venerate that adopted family, because those, you know, that's your family. And those are the people that were responsible for your well-being. And the other reason why it's okay to venerate those that aren't of your blood but were family is because you don't know what the spiritual contract was that had them participate in your life in the way that they did. My grandmother, I didn't know as a child that she was not my grandmother. She favored me above her actual grandsons, which were my brothers, my half-brothers. And I had no idea that she was not a blood relative. And I didn't know that until after she passed. But I honor her because I don't know what the spiritual contract that had her son, my dad, marry my mother, and him and his family lined up to love and support me the whole time they were here. I don't know what that contract was, but whatever it was is worthy of honor. So honor those people on your space. And I hope I answered your question.
Yes. Oh, wow. Thank you. Yes. Yes.
Okay. So Cassidy, do you have any questions thus far?
Yeah. I mean, we're probably about to go into it here with this slide, but the table coverings, and thank you for explaining like the color and the importance of it. For myself, I have cats that will rip anything dangling off of a table, and my current ancestor altar space is it's sort of like its own end table that I just have on the wood. And if I put long story short, if I had a cloth on there, I would be afraid that they might rip it off with everything with it. So my question is, of the things, and with your supply list here, is that something that could be, like, could I put just a small, I don't know, like a napkin size white cloth on the table that doesn't quite like cover the whole space, or would that not? Would that serve?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, definitely. Just remember this. It has to be practical, because the more practical it is, the easier the upkeep. And it is very of crucial importance that you upkeep your altar. So if your table, I think you said it was an end table, if it is, say it's a piece of furniture, like if it's a piece of furniture that you don't mind doing an alteration on, one thing that I could say is, like I described, the going to the Home Depot, buying a piece of wood, having them cut it to a certain size for you, and then covering it with the cloth and stapling it on the underside with a staple gun. Is that something you could do or feel like that's okay to do to that piece of furniture? Do something like that if you think it would work. You could totally use a handkerchief. There are times when I am refreshing my altar, and so I put my cloth to wash it, you know, and sometimes I'm a little lackadaisical with my laundry, like, so it'll be in the dryer for a week, you know. So
yes.
I will actually refresh my altar table by putting white handkerchiefs down, like the cloth ones, and they do sell those. Like, I know here I buy them at Walmart. They sell them in the men's section with the underwear. But you'll be surprised when you start to look for these things, you'll see them. When you have them on your mind, I need these things, they'll start to show up in stores that you frequent. So I use white handkerchiefs, and that's totally appropriate. You could even use like placemats or anything like that. Or, you know, forego it altogether, especially if you have a wood table, because wood is a natural material. So whichever way you need to set that up, it's going to be totally fine.
Yeah, because I inherited these 2 end tables and coffee table set from my great aunt who passed away earlier this year, and it's just made a perfect one. The end table is like
yes. So that right there makes it a perfect. Like, yes, definitely. If you can put the white cloth on some way on it, or a handkerchief or whatever, that's fine. But it is actually from your dead. You know what I'm saying? Like, it is a piece that they had in life. That's even better. That's even better.
Okay, awesome. Because I'd like to have some sort of like cloth or space on at least part of it. But if anything dangling over the edges wouldn't live long in this house.
Yeah.
The other question I had about that, does material matter? Could you do? I mean, maybe not. But I was just thinking like a piece of fur or something, because I might have as a white. It wouldn't be covering the whole thing, just as part of it.
Sure.
Or would it be, does material really matter?
To my knowledge, it's okay to use the fur. I'm not gonna. I would not, as I guess calling myself a teacher, I would not try to answer or tell you something that I don't have knowledge about. Like, I would tell you that I will research that for you. I haven't run across anything that I can think of that says that it's a faux pas to put fur. I guess, is it, for me, I guess it would come down to, like, is it real fur or is it faux fur? Faux fur, to my knowledge, there's no issue with that. Real fur, the only reason I would think that there could be a conflict in some way is because it came from an animal, and depending on how that animal had to die. So that I would do more research on for you. And I can definitely email you what I find on that. But to my knowledge, the material, you find a lot of sources will say cotton, but I've used other materials. It's fine. And like I said, one of my teachers, she uses a cloth off of her sister's casket. So that's not cotton at all, but it has significance. So, you could use something, if there's a certain type of print or fabric that has to do with your heritage, you could use that. You could use, at one point I used a sequin material because it was just beautiful and sparkly. And it reminded me of some of the women in my family and how getting dressed up and going out and, really dressed to the nines was their thing. So there's a lot like that you could say, this is significant to my family because of X, Y, and Z. And that's a chance for you to personalize your space even further. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a really good point. Just because I have some of my past relatives were, up in Canada. They were hunters as well. So I have various things that were, but that was kind of more my point as well. Like if I was ever to put something, or I've got
well, that's very interesting with the whole, since they were hunters. So I'll tell you that I'll do some research on it a little further, and I'll let you know what I find out, definitely.
Sure. Thank you. This is fascinating, by the way. This is incredible. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So if we talk about setting up your space, all right, so we covered a lot of this in our examination of the altar, so I'll very quickly go through it. But in setting it all up, you definitely want to gather your supplies together. And And keep in mind, these are not things that you have to run out and buy. These are things that you can repurpose from around your home. And I always try to think of, you know, some people want to definitely make it an investment and have a very special, fancy space. And there's nothing wrong with that, like nothing at all. And other people have to be very mindful of the budget, and they really don't have the money to get out and really get to shop and buy the more expensive items for their space. So I'm going to try to talk from a budget-minded or budget-conscious point. But remember, you can go as fancy as you want to. The important thing is making sure you can upkeep your altar. We don't want dusty, crusty, full of mold altars. We want refreshed and sparkling and beautiful altars. It's very important. So just keep that in mind as you gather your supplies. So definitely, whether you're going to use that piece of wood, you're going to use a piece of furniture, like in Cassidy's case, she has a special piece of furniture that she inherited. Perfect altar. Just a plain table. Mine is in a corner of my living space, and I bought a corner desk, and it wasn't an expensive desk. I think I went to Target.com, maybe. I can't remember. It's been so long ago. But I bought a corner desk because I knew I have this thing about having my ancestor altar in a corner of the room. So I knew I wanted a corner desk, and it can be as simple as that. It can be any manner of table that you have, or drawers, like a dresser or anything like that. You can set it on top of a dresser. What are those? I'm trying to think of the name of those cabinets you put in your dining room. But it could be something like that as well. So you also, as we were just discussing table coverings, you need picture frames. So unfortunately, I don't think my video is going to come up, but I'll just let y'all in on what it was. I had done a field trip. It was a shopping trip, and I went to several stores, and I took you guys with me, and I was showing you in these stores. One was a Dollar Tree, which is a store here in the U.S. Where every single item in the store costs $1 only. And so I was in there and just showing some of the things that I use to put on my altar that you can find for $1. And one of those items was picture frames. So in the Dollar Tree, they have these little plastic picture frames. I don't have one handy. But when I first started my ancestor space, I used those dollar picture frames. And the reason that I used them was because I had quite a few pictures, and I wanted to buy a frame for everyone's pictures, but I had in mind that moving forward, I would switch out those frames when I found frames that I felt were special and frames that spoke to me about the person that I was going to put, the picture that I was going to put in the frame. So I wanted a special frame that I thought spoke to me of my grandmother or my aunt, or, so I bought a whole bunch of dollar frames and then slowly switched them out when I would find the special frames that I was looking for. So that's kind of like an idea. Or there's nothing wrong with having just the dollar frames from here until whenever. Some sources will try to tell you that, oh, the frame has to be a natural material like wood or shell. I think sometimes that people get a little carried away with the rules of it all. There are definite guidelines that you should undertake when you're putting together your altar. And I'm definitely trying to lay all of that out for you and let you know what is a strong guideline as we go along here. But I don't think picture frames is one of them, or at least my dad never had a problem with the frame. So that's what I can tell you. The other thing is candles, lots and lots of candles. So I use, and I have one here, these vigil candles. They're glass enclosed candles, and they're called 7-day candles as well. And they're supposed to, by the name, of course, they're supposed to last 7 days. Well, they last somewhere, if you burn them straight without snuffing them, that is. They last anywhere between 4 to 7 days, depending on where you buy them. And some of them have a greater diameter than others. They do sell them at the Dollar Tree, and they're $1. And then they also sell them at grocery stores. You find them in, like, if you go to a grocery store with a Latin food section, like Spanish foods, they'll usually be there. I found them at Target. I find them at Botanicas, which are Spanish spiritual supply stores. And you can find them in every color and size that you want in a Botanica. And so you could pay anywhere between $1 and $4. And so those I use, but you can also, some sources, again, they'll make a rule. Candles, but no tea lights. I burn tea lights all the time for spiritual purposes, and they're great. So if that's what you have, and if that's what you have to work with, you use it, because what is important? What's important is that you give your ancestors light. It's a strong spiritual force, and having it for them is really important. So I always tell people, think of it like this. Think of it like this. If you were sitting, say you were locked up in a dark room with no light source. So you're in this room for weeks and weeks on end, no light source, no one's coming to see you. It's going to mess with you a little bit. Like, it's going to mess with you a lot. You're going to feel all kind of ways, and your outlook is going to be very discouraged. And then all of a sudden, someone busts open a door with a candle in their hand, and light just floods into the space. You're immediately going to be affected by that. You're immediately going to be uplifted by that. You're immediately going to be so happy that that person showed up. That's how I view when you light those candles for your dead. I view that the effect that it has on them spiritually is like that light flooding into their space, uplifting them. It's also acting as a beacon or a lighthouse, so that they find your altar space, and then they come in and they commune there with you. So candles, fire, the light, like I said before, you can use an oil lamp as your light. So important, so unnecessary. If you don't have anything else on this space, have the candles, have the water. If that's all you have to work with, those two things are necessary. The rest of this is want to have, or, I would say the things in white here on this slide, the candles, the table, those are all the makings of a basic altar. So if you're just starting out and you've got a limited amount of funds and you just want to set up a basic space, that is, trick-or-treaters are ringing my doorbell, even though I don't have my name on the list for candy. So we're just going to ignore the doorbell. I hope you don't hear it. Anyways, the items here on this slide written in white, those are the components of a basic altar space, okay? Everything else you can add to make it even better. Now, the next item on the list is the spiritual wash, the spiritual bath.
Can I ask
So,
a question?
a-
Or do you want me to wait till
absolutely.
after?
No, please.
With the candles, is it
Mhm.
acceptable to only have them on when you're actually near the altar? Because I'm like freaky about fire. Or should you have them on more often? I mean, is it acceptable to extinguish those candles when you're not right there?
Absolutely. So, yeah, and so we were talking about that a little bit remember when we were looking at the altar that had the taper candle?
Yeah.
So you could totally, because as you start your practice, you're going to choose times to sit at your altar. And you can just light the candles then, and that's perfectly acceptable. So you sit there, you light the candle when you're talking to your ancestors, and then you snuff it. We don't want to blow out candles, because in a practice like this, blowing out candles is a no-no. So you want to snuff it out. So whether you have a snuffer or whether you put something, a cup or something, a plate, however you light your candle. Like if you have, okay, let me stop talking in a confused manner. So say this is my candle, my glass enclosed candle, and I light it, and I don't want to leave it on all the time. And when I walk away from my space, say this is a plate, my phone, I'm going to use my phone, and this is like a little saucer for a teacup or something. When I get ready to walk away, I'm just going to, snuff out the air source, and the candle will go out. And so, yes, you can totally do that. If, I take more chances, obviously, and like I said, I want everyone to be safe. I leave mine on. But if you're uncomfortable with that, you don't want to do that, definitely. And if you have animals, I wouldn't suggest it, because anything can happen when you're not around. So yes, it's totally acceptable to only have those candles on while you're at the space or near the space where you can monitor the fire that's there, definitely.
Thank you. I'm sorry I interrupted.
Absolutely not. You're fine. So the spiritual wash and the spiritual bath. So as we are going to set up our space, it is very important that we start from a clean space. And the first thing you're going to want to do is to take a spiritual bath. It is going to be so helpful in setting up your connection with your ancestors, because when you walk around in your day-to-day life, and whenever you encounter people and even physical objects, everything you encounter in your day-to-day life, something, so say people have bad attitudes and you cross paths with them, or quote unquote, they've had some type of spiritual curse or work done on them. When you're crossing paths with people in your day-to-day life, then you pick up a little bit of that. It's kind of like, anything. Like if you I don't know, if you rubbed up against something that was dirty, you might not be filthy for rubbing up against it, but you get a little bit of it on you. So if you're going throughout your day-to-day life and you're not regularly taking spiritual baths, you're getting more and more spiritual gunk on you. So then when you actually go to sit down and try to reach out and make this connection, it's a little more difficult. You got to get through a little bit more dirt in the ears, and you might not hear that message as strongly. And that's a silly example, but it's actually a pretty good example. You know, spiritual earwax. You know, you can't hear the message come in. And so, you know, spiritual hygiene, spiritual cleanliness is just as important as physical cleanliness. And when people start to understand that truly and take heed to it and stay more and more spiritually cleansed, you will find that a lot of the issues things that you consider issues will start to fall away from your life without any spiritual help. So spiritual cleanliness, we definitely want to start our altar on the right foot. And if you don't take a spiritual bath any other time, take one before you start the process of setting up the altar. Save some of that solution that you're using for your spiritual bath and use it in a bucket with some water to cleanse the space that you're going to set up for your ancestors. So you might want to cleanse the walls. Just a quick wipe down while you pray that the area be spiritually cleansed, and clean the floor. If it's a carpeted space, you can. I sometimes will take and just drop little droplets of the spiritual wash solution on it, so that you also clear that space as well, because everything that happens in your home, the arguments, the yelling, the hard feelings, negative people stopping by and leaving a little bit of their negative spiritual gunk, when you're having hard times and there are money problems or love problems or any kind of problem, it builds up in your home. If you don't spiritually cleanse your home, just as if you don't spiritually cleanse your body, your space is now spiritually dirty. And here's one thing. My ancestors are always kicking my ass about spiritual cleansing. Like, that's the thing. So they like spiritually clean spaces. Think of it like this. Would you invite your grandmother over without attempting to clean up the house first? I wouldn't. Some people might. I would be like, I know grandma's coming today, so she's going to have something to say if she walks in here, and it looks like it does right now. So let me get up and spiritually cleanse. And yeah, you can spiritually cleanse the whole house. That's always a good thing. But if you don't do the whole house, just do the area that the altar is going to be in before you commence with setting up the altar. It's going to start you on the right road, on the fresh ground. All right, so quickly, let me go through some of these other items. So the incense burner, of course, we were talking before, we want to give them pleasant offerings of fragrance and smells, and that's important. An offering plate and dishes, another item that I get from the Dollar Tree. I get these ceramic white round plates and bowls. Just the type of bowls that you eat and the type of dinner plates that you eat off of. They're white. I save them. Like, I have a whole set of them, 5 or 6 of each, and I keep those just for my ancestors, and I store them in the desk that is my altar, and no one eats off of those but them. So you want to have on, even if you just have one, and it can be you inherited a set of dishes from your grandmother. Maybe you don't want to, save them all for your ancestors, but just save one. Or a coffee cup. A coffee cup. Coffee is an offering that I give my ancestors a lot. And so I save a special coffee cup just for them. And so those are things that you want to have on hand. And again, these things that are in gold here on this slide, these are things that if you can only afford the basics, you would aspire to the things in gold at a later time. A flower vase, because spirits love fresh flowers, and an offering of fresh flowers is great. Live plants, like I said, and any kind of holy book, whether it's a Bible, a Quran, Torah, whatever they believed in, that's a good book to put on their space. And if you have a family Bible, even better. This is my grandmother's Bible, and she has recorded in here the names of her brothers and sisters and their birth dates, and the ones that died before her, which all of her siblings died before her. She has the dates of their deaths. And I keep this on the altar. I might even open it up to a special verse, like Psalms 23. The Lord is my shepherd, shall not want. So that's a good thing to have for your altar as well. But if you have to go into Dollar Tree and buy a Bible for $1, and I have one here actually, so paperback, they sell them at the Dollar Tree. You find them there pretty regularly, and if you know your ancestors were Christian, this is a good representation. Costs $1, so it's easy. All right, so in setting it all up, I'm going to speed up a little bit because, wow, I thought I was not going to have enough to talk about in this presentation to fill up the time, but I obviously, I guess I talk a lot. So setting it all up. So definitely decide on the location. Some suggestions. My teacher told me, and she does this, she always wants her table facing the east with the west, the direction behind it. So the reason for that is she wants the sun to rise up before them. And I thought that is powerful. And if you're in a tradition where directions, north, south, east, west, are important, facing your altar to the east for your ancestors so that the sun rises before them, powerful. Again, take a spiritual bath. We talked about this. And cleaning the space. There we go. All right, putting it all together. So you want to decide on your setup. We took a look at a number of them. Again, it can be as simple as my space, my tablecloth, my candle, a glass of water, and I don't know, my Bible. It could be that simple. No muss, no fuss, or as complicated as you like. Decide on how you want to set it up, and if you want the pictures on the walls, if you just have a plan for your space. All right, and then deciding who to honor and not to honor on your space is a very important part of your plan. So, if you had, let me start here. People have this perception that when someone passes away, now they're all airy-fairy and full of love and light. No. The dead are very much the same personality as when they were living, if not more strongly the same personality. Probably, and this is my best guesstimation from all the study that I've done on, who the ancestors are when you become an ancestor. I'm guessing that when they enter the land of the ancestors, and remember that's further down the line, that they have elevated, and they've been in spirit long enough where some of those personality quirks are no longer a part of who they are. That's my best assumption. But when they are technically you're dead and have not yet gotten there, if they were feisty in life, they're feisty in death. If they were, sweet, loving, and kind, they're sweet, loving, and kind now. If they were a real son of a bitch, they're a real son of a bitch now in death. And if they were abusive, if they were cruel, if they were rapists, murderers, any of those things, they are negative in their spiritual state. There are, depending on your family, of course, there are people you're probably not, it's not advisable for you to venerate. Again, if someone who has passed on in your family is a murderer, if they're a rapist, if they molested children, if they molested you, if they were just terrible people who never were good to you while they were alive, do not put them on your ancestor altar. Okay? Because you're literally inviting in the spirits that you place on that altar into your home. And you don't want those people in your home. Do not put them there. Now, a big part of ancestor veneration is about uplifting the ancestors, giving them light and raising them spiritually. That's the absolute truth. That's why the candles are important, the spiritual light. That's why the water is important, refreshing their spirit, because you are spiritually lifting them to a higher elevated place. And even though a murderer needs to be elevated, they've got a lot of work to do on the other side before they can get to a state where it is even safe for you to venerate them on your altar. Because in the meantime, they're going to be in your home. Remember this. When you go to your altar, they're going to be there. Remember that. Don't put anybody on your space that was a threat to you or who was bad to you or awful to you. You don't want that. You don't want that influence in your home. And they will attain some of that elevation by the lights that you set for your other family members. Because when you raise up your family, they're being a part of it, they're going to elevate as well. Okay? But you don't want to directly engage with them. And when you put someone on your space, you directly engage with them. So the question is, all right, I know everyone back to my grandparent or my great-grandparents. What if the murderer was 300 years ago? When you make the general call to your ancestors to come in, and we'll talk about that shortly, you will be specific in stating that you want those good ancestors in. You're not going to just invite the whole thousands and thousands. You're going to invite those who are willing to work with you, who have your best interests, and who were good in life. That's who you're inviting in. Okay?
There's you'll go over this, calling in the people that you want. Is there a way / would it be necessary to actively put something on your space to, I guess, block them, the more we don't want you here spirits? Or is it like the inviting of the good will just they won't, you know, ever come along with that? Or should you actively like block their entrance in some way?
All right. So no, you won't need to actively block their interest, because with your call, your invocation, you can make a statement in your invocation to block certain people. I'm all for that. Block them by name if you know their name. But you can state your invocation in a way as to block those who are not good in life. The invocation is going to come from a strong place, and those that don't meet that criteria are not going to be in. Another way that you can handle it is once you've set up your space, say you're feeling kind of like, oh, I don't know, something feels a little off and I think somebody's here that I don't want here, but I can't put my finger on it. If you have a dearly departed relative who was good to you in life, I always go to grandmother on that because that's who that was for me. You can task that relative with, Grandma, I don't know what's going on, but I think Uncle Joe is here, and I specifically said I didn't want him here. They will police each other. Trust me. If you tell your dead, I don't want anybody in this space with you who was not a good person in life. Anyone who did harm to other people, I don't want them here. I need all of y'all to get rid of these ones that don't belong. It will happen. You will feel your space become clearer. So there's nothing you need to do to actively block them, because actively blocking, you could block more than who you intend to block. So make the invocation, and then if it still happens that you feel or you see indication of spiritual activity not in line with what you've called in, then you work with the ones that are there that are good to police their own. You know you had that aunt or that uncle who would set somebody's ass down and make them leave you alone. They'll do that after they passed on too. So trust me when I tell you, because as you further advance in your practice of ancestor venerations and you do start to work with them on some of the things that are going on in your own personal life, and you start having them help you, you're going to see what a strong force you're dealing with. And they can make things happen, and they can certainly move living people out of your way. So they can definitely move one of their own out of your way. So that's how you handle that. Does that help you?
Yes, thank you so much. Very much so.
You're welcome. So the last thing you do in your setup is you call in your dead. And like I said, you will sit before them, and you will, after you've bathed, you set up you've cleared your spiritual space for the altar. You've gone through the setup of your altar, and now you're ready to light your candles, and you're ready. You offer your water. You're ready to light your candle. So there's a few ways you can do it, and it really comes down to what you're very comfortable with. It doesn't have to be ceremonial at all. These are different type of spirits than other spirits that you might build an altar for or work with. These are your blood. They already know you. They knew you before you got here. So you don't have to get all fancy smancy with them and make it into a ceremony, because it's unnecessary. You just talk to them. Tell them. You might want to say a prayer. If you know there was a special Bible verse, maybe Psalms 23, you might want to say that. And then you just get to listen You can call their names, of the ones you know. You do a roll call, and then at the end of that roll call, you can say, all my ancestors, known and unknown, I call to you. I call you to this space. I call to you, those of you that were good in your lives, that didn't actively hurt others or pursue others for wrongful things. I want you to come and join me in this space. I've set aside this space in my home for you. I set aside this space for you to commune with me. I set aside this space to welcome you here. My home is your home, and this is your home within my home. I want you to come to this altar space, and I want you to partake in the offerings, and I want to commune with you. I want to speak with you. I want to get to know you. I want to uplift you. And this is your space. Please come to this space. And you make that call. And you make it from a place of you make it from your heart, and they will come. Funniest thing I saw the other day is this group I was in on Facebook. This girl posted a question, and this is so typical. She said, I started my ancestor altar 4 days ago and nothing. What is going on? Can someone tell me what's going on? Why are they not talking to me? And I kind of laugh because we're in this age of microwave spiritualism. And it's like, this is a process. And this is your first step. Building the altar, actually, it starts with you planning the altar and getting the supplies. Like, you're already spiritually doing something. But when you sit down and set up that altar and make that call for them to come in, it's a powerful act. But it's not like sticking it in the microwave and 30 seconds later, all your ancestors are there and they're talking to you. And now they're doing stuff for you. No, it's a process. It's a relationship. Yes, they know you. Their blood is your blood. They have these are spirits that have the most vested interest in your well-being and your happiness. And this is why, like I said, their blood's running through your veins. And you are, at this point in time, a physical representation of them in this living world. So they also are spirits that have lived on this earth. A lot of spirits that people are out here honoring have never been human. They've never lived a human existence. They don't know what it's like when the rent is due and you're $200 short. They don't know what it's like to be hungry and not have enough food. They have a understanding of the things that you go through. And because you are of them and they already love you, they have a vested interest. And like I said, even if you are all out of sorts with your family members and you're like, none of them are worth anything. All right. Those are only a handful of people that you knew in this life. You have ancestors going back to the beginning of time. You have a large spiritual force at your back that loves you. So that's number one. Number two, it's just like now I'm losing my train of thought. You're probably going to have to edit this part. So, yes, they have this vested interest in you. They're going to show up for you. They're going to work for you. But it is a relationship like any other. So now that you've invited them in, right, some of them, many of them, you haven't had a one-on-one connection with while you were here in this physical form. So let's talk about the actual ones that are truly ancestors way back in time. Me as Crystal, I haven't, in my existence as Crystal, have not had a connection with Esmeralda. I think I only picked that name because it's Halloween. Esmeralda, way back 600 years ago. So now I'm building that with her. So it's going to take time. It's not going to be 4 days. It's going to be longer. And that brings up another point. People, same microwave kinds of spiritualism, like to set up an altar, and then all of a sudden, they want to start asking for favors. Hey, I'm looking for a job. I need y'all to help me. Make it work. Let's do this. I'm going to light you this candle and you're going to get me a job, right? This is a practice. It's a very beautiful practice. And when you act like that, you're in essence acting like a spoiled brat who cannot wait 5 minutes. So you totally miss out on everything that's going to happen in making that connection with your spiritual family. And you cheat yourself and you cheat them. And guess what? When you could cheat yourself, but if you start cheating them, they're not really feeling you on that. So that job that you're demanding, they're probably not going to jump in and help you. Don't be a taskmaster when it comes to your ancestors. They are there to help you, but you first have to take these crucial steps to build a strong connection with them. Not only, it's just, when I say build a strong connection, you're building a strong relationship with them. So Esmeralda, I don't know the beauty of her love and, how she can direct that towards me so that I can feel her love. And I don't know a lot about her. I'm going to learn that over the course of the next year. I tell people, for the first year that your altar space is set up, strictly focus on bringing your offerings and connecting and communing with them. All right? So that's a very important aspect. Don't rush this connection. I've met people in this life that it has taken me from the time of meeting them 2 and 3 years to actually form a connection with them to where I can say this person really is my friend. And so you have to consider that not all connections that you make, whether in the living or with the dead, are instantaneous. It is a process. And you, in the end, will get so much more out of this if you don't try to rush that. So I have listed here a lot of offerings and what to give, and we've talked about some of these. And I'll just highlight a couple. So coffee, they love it. I don't know what it is. I love coffee, so I get it. But I don't know if it's because it comes from a bean, then it comes from the ground, and it's a very grounding beverage, but they love it. I don't know if it's because the caffeine is enlivening. I put out coffee a lot, and it's a very loved offering. Their favorite foods. So those that you knew, and you may know some of their favorite foods, a great offering. So whenever you are putting out a food offering for them, in the preparation of that food, try to omit salt. Don't really use salt because salt is very strong and it very much drives spirits away. So you don't want to use salt in the food. If they had a favorite candy, tobacco, if they smoked cigarettes, people leave cigarettes on the altar as a space. Now you can light the cigarette, smoke it, talk to them. But if you have a problem with that, it's perfectly okay just to leave the unlit tobacco on the space. But tobacco also, I use cigars. I love cigars, but smoking a cigar, speaking to the spirits is very strong because the tobacco itself is an offering, but it's another thing that is a connector, just like the water is conducive to the spiritual connection. The water on your altar allows a spirit to come in and connect with you. Tobacco does the same thing. It takes messages to the ethers, and it's a very strong offering. Again, you can leave an unlit cigar on your space, and if one of your relatives you knew was a cigar smoker or smoked a pipe, even better. But you can totally light it up during the time that you're communing with them. It's a really powerful act. Libation, so alcohol. Generally speaking, depending on what tradition you might come from, it might be rum that you want to use, and it might be whiskey. And root work, we use whiskey as our libation. But if your aunt loved red wine, pour her a glass of red wine and put it right in front of her picture. Let her know it's for her. If someone else liked, tequila, it's okay. Now, the only time that I would hold back on that is if I knew one of my relatives was a alcoholic in life, and so I wouldn't give that person a alcohol libation. Not because alcohol, I mean, they don't have a physical body, obviously, but alcohol caused that person so much hardship in life, I wouldn't give them something that I knew was an actual real problem for them. All right. But what alcohol does as an offering in general, because sometimes I'll just set down a glass of whiskey on my altar for all of them. And what it does is it energizes them. It's considered to be a festive offering, it's kind of like if you were starting a party, you're just going to get everything all livened up. Alcohol does that as an offering. What not to give? We talked about the salt and blood. Please don't put blood on your ancestor altar. Your blood. You don't want them to hunger for the living. That's what I'll say. As I stated before, in your representation of items, do not put anything of a living person. Don't put a picture that has a living person. Don't put, I won't even write down the name of a living person and place it there. I don't put anything that is of a living person. So it makes the dead hunger for the living. You can literally, like I told you, this is a very strong spiritual space. From the moment you start, it's strong. It only increases in strength over time. So you have to be mindful of what you're doing when you're there from the standpoint of putting items on your space, because you could literally speed someone's transition to the other side, and you don't want to do that. You don't want to be responsible for that. Okay. So now that you have an altar, what do? You visit with them. You go there. If you are the person that lights your candles only when you're there, you light your candle. You can have a little bell if that's how you want to call them. Some people do that, and that's perfectly acceptable. When you're setting up your space, one thing that I didn't say was when you set up your space and then you first make that invocation to them to come, and you're telling them, this is your space in my home. I built this space for you, and this is where I would like you to reside in my home when you come to visit. You take them on a little tour, just like if they showed up at your house today and they had never been there, you would give them a little tour. So you take them on a little tour of your altar. You say, look, these are the pictures. This is all these pictures. Uncle Joe, this is you. And Aunt Myrna, this is you. And I have a water glass set out for all of you. Or look, I have water set out for each one of you individually. You could put water in a water goblet or a wine glass and set it at each picture. Some people will put candles separately at the different pictures. I've done that before. But generally speaking, I just put a candle. I was like, this is your spiritual light. I hope it brings you, I hope it lights up your dark places. This is your water. I hope it refreshes your spirit. I gave you this libation, this whiskey. Let's get this party started. So you take them on a little tour of the altar space, and then that way they're very familiar with everything. So when you light your candle, you're like, I light this candle for you. And again, you can just do a quick call. All my ancestors, and I have gotten to the point where I say all my helpful ancestors, because I've already gone through the process of having the invitation to call them, let them know that this is their space. And I've gone through, over these years that I've been doing this, okay, I'm not going to honor this person. I'm not honoring this person over here. So we've gone through, so those that come to my altar are those that are helpful to me, that want to be of service and helpful to me, and I am of service and helpful to them. We have that understanding. That's what I've built with them over the years. So when I call them in, I simply say, all my ancestors, known and unknown, who are my helpful ancestors. I'm here. Let's talk. Let's whatever. So they come at that point. You talk to them about your hopes, your dreams, your manifestations. Talk to them about what's important to you. What is important to you? You talk to them about your children. You talk to them about your grandchildren if you have them. Talk to them about anything that you're interested in, just so it's a conversation. They're visiting your home. Talk about the themes that, are special memories for the ones that you knew in life. I remember when we did this, and this, that was so special to me because I don't think you know it, but that day, you taking that time just meant you just have this conversation. Talk to them about what's happening in your world, and maybe some things that are of concern to you, but also the things that make you happy, Share a meal with them. So like I said, when you cook for them, make sure you don't add salt to their dish, but I will have a meal with them. So I'll make my plate. I'll make a plate for them. Like I said, I use the special plates that I buy only for them. And then I will just put one scoop. Like if I'm having mashed potatoes, I put one scoop of mashed potatoes. I put a small piece of meat. I put, that's how I do it. And then I take their plate and I'll take a little stick candle, like it's those little emergency candles that you find at the store, or those Jewish candles that you find on the international food aisle. I'll put that in the middle of the plate and light it. And I give them their plate. I present it to them. I tell them what I've made for them. I light it. And I'll sit there at my altar and eat dinner with them and have these conversations about what's going on with me, or if something's troubling me or something's made me really happy. I'll talk to them about my grandchildren and stuff like that. So you can do the same with drinks and coffee. I'll have a glass of wine. Hell, I sit here and drink all the time with my ancestors. My family, the ones that are now passed away that I knew in life, they were all pretty much drinkers. So I have drinks with them and laugh with them just like I did when they were here. You can read to them. If you found something that you're reading that you're really interested in, you read to them. I do a lot of reading on topics like Black history. and I'll read to them what I'm reading. You can play music for them. If there's culturally some type of music that represents your culture, perfect. You can turn that music on before you even light the candle and sit down, and just let them know, I'm playing this music. This music is a offering to you. It's just for you. And then play it and tell them you're going to play it for a certain period of time, and play that in your house for that certain period of time. You can sing to them. You can literally do anything you would do in a visit with someone. Like, that's how you interact with them. How do you know a connection was made? Important point, because this is where people tend to get restless and they just feel like they're not doing things right. There are symbols and signs that let you know that they're present, and one of them is in your water glasses that you leave on your altar. If you notice little tiny bubbles all through the water, that is generally thought of as a clear sign that they're present. And I notice that a lot. It doesn't happen every single time I set out water for them, but so much of the time, those water bubbles are present in the glasses. And I think any spiritual person that you talk to about ancestor veneration, that's one thing that they'll tell you is a sign that they are present. Over time, they start to show up in ways that are easy for you to understand. So you don't have to be psychic to connect with them. They will show up in your dreams. Or you will have dreams with very clear messaging in them. Even if you don't understand quite what that message is, you will know that there was a message in that dream and it was very clear. So a lot of times it will take you also looking in the dream interpretation. And that is another clear way that they speak to you. I find that they speak, I have clear audience, and I find that they give me a lot of messages, and they talk to me through my clear audience. You can also use a tool like a pendulum that you dedicate to them. And by dedicating it to them, you present it to them on the altar. This is more of an advanced practice, but I'll go ahead and give it here. You present the pendulum on the altar space, and you tell them that it is specifically for you to communicate with them as a tool. And then I leave that there for at least 21 days. Just leave it there. It's theirs, on their space. They're going to infuse it. And when you use it, you will be able to use it to gain messages from them. And we could talk in a further workshop about how to use that pendulum. You'll find that they will make known what they want on their space and what they don't want on their space. Sometimes it's very annoying because sometimes you will find that stuff is falling off your damn table, and okay, maybe the wind blew. I didn't have a window open, but maybe the wind blew through here. So you'll fix it back up, and then you'll find that it falls down again, and it just won't stay right. They probably don't want it. So look at what the item is, take it away for a while, and see how the space, but honest, they will, at times, they will make that forceful of a move to literally kick something off the space that they don't want there. Or you'll get somewhere, you'll be going about your business and you keep seeing one thing in particular throughout your day. And it just keeps coming. And it might be, I don't know, a little gold bowl. Like everywhere you turn, you see a similar little gold bowl. Well, maybe if you're at that point using your pendulum, that's a good way to use it. Go back and say, are you interested in having a little gold bowl on your space? Because I keep running into it and see if you get a yes or no answer. So also they'll let you know through your clear audience if you have it, or any way that you currently connect spiritually. You'll see things in your dreams again that they may want. These are all ways that they communicate with you. I'm going to start to wrap this up here. Yep, I'm going to wrap up, but let me say this, because this is another one of the rules. Like I said, there's only a couple of rules really that I have found that you have to adhere to. One of them being don't mix the living with the dead. And another one being don't set up an ancestor altar if you cannot maintain it, because it is really important that you are consistent in your practice. It's basically like you opening the door to them and then kicking them out and slamming it shut if you were to just suddenly stop servicing your altar. I suggest to people that they start with a very basic altar, because a lot of people who come to Ancestor Veneration have never practiced with an altar before, and this is their first time, and it can be overwhelming if you set yourself up this big, beautiful altar with all kinds of different components. It gets very overwhelming very fast, and it doesn't seem like it may, but it does. And so it's better to start with something extremely basic, a glass of water and a candle, and then decide on how often you are going to service. So if you say, I know I can only do this once a month, then stick to that. Once a month, set aside 20 minutes or whatever you need to service your altar. Sit down, have that conversation, talk about last month, whatever you're going to do. Or if you decide, I'm going to do this every day, then that's a tall order. I do mine once a week, and Monday is normally my day. Monday, I take the glasses of water and I clear them out, and I bring back clean glasses of water for them. I usually light a brand new vigil candle every Monday. Now with food offerings, you don't want your food sitting up there getting moldy. So depending on your situation, for me, I live in an apartment building. It's an older building. I don't want to sit anything out for a long period of time where pests will be drawn into my space. So I will tell them when I leave the food on their altar, I'm going to leave this here until tonight, and then I'm going to take it away. But if you're comfortable with leaving it for a couple of days or whatever, you can do so. And then just before it goes bad, take it away. I refresh my flowers when I don't give them flowers every single week, but I'll refresh my flowers, make sure they're still fresh, take away any wilting or dead ones. So keep it up, be consistent with it. As you start with your basic altar and you're able to maintain it well, then go ahead and make it a little nicer, a little fancier, and it won't be so overwhelming to maintain. So I hope this has all been great for you guys, and I pray that you got a lot out of this. And thank you for joining me tonight. And if you have any questions and want to follow up with me, they'll be providing you with my email and ways to get in contact with me. And please reach out. Thank you.